it's Stephanie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to do my August wrap-up. I read a total of 30 books in August and a lot of pages, and so I have a lot to get through, so let's just jump right in. So August was Newt's month. My career was to be a librarian, and so for that I had to get an O in Ancient Runes, an E in Defense Against the Dark Arts, and E in History of Magic. And I am happy to say that I did do that, so I am officially a librarian in the world of Harry Potter. And so total, I did all 12 owls previously, and then I got 28 newts. So the first book I read is From Twinkle with Love by Sandhya Menon. This follows the story of Twinkle, and she is a film connoisseur. She loves everything to do with filming, and she wants to be a director one day. And one day she gets an email from a secret admirer who she thinks is this really popular guy, and so she's emailing back and forth with him, and then his brother Sahil is also a film guru, so he and Twinkle get together to create a film that's like a gender-bent Dracula, and so their relationship starts to grow and their friendship develops, but at the same time Twinkle is still messaging the secret admirer who she thinks is his brother, and chaos ensues. But overall, I loved this book. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I reread There's Something About Sweetie less than a week after I read it the first time, and I annotated it, lots of tabs, but I won't go into this because I did cover it in my last video, and I think I'm going to do a review for this, but I absolutely love this book. It's one of my favorite books of the year. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I also reread Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. So again, I won't go into this because I did cover it last month, but basically fantastical world, magical libraries, grimoires, sorcery, evil forces at work. What more could you ask for? I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So next I read City of Ghosts by Victoria Schwab, and this follows the story of Cass, who after a near-death experience can now cross the veil between the living world and the world of ghosts, and her parents do not know this, and her parents are TV hosts that host a show about the most haunted places, and so they end up going to Edinburgh, and Cass's best friend is actually a ghost, and so they have a really close relationship. And while they're in Edinburgh, and she ends up meeting this girl who has the same gift as her, and Cass realizes that she really doesn't know as much as she thought she did about the veil. And this is a middle grade book, and I listened to it mostly on audio and the rest physically, and I really enjoyed it. It's a really fast read, and I loved the world that Victoria Schwab created, and I just think this was such a cool story. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read the short story As Kismet Would Have It by Sandhya Menon, and this follows When Dimple Met Rishi, and so I won't go into it because it does spoil the end of the book, but I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was a really good read. It was about 60 pages, and it was just a lighthearted story with a really good ending, and you should definitely read it once you've read When Dimple Met Rishi. I read The Devouring Grey, which has been pitched as Stranger Things meets Riverdale, which I totally agree. And this basically follows the story of Violet, and she and her mom move back to her mom's hometown, Boar Pass, and there's a lot of sinister things going on, and there's also something called the Grey, which is like a mist, and bodies start to appear that are just kind of mutilated, and it's coming from the gray. And so she has to figure out what's going on, and she gets swept up in it. And it was a really good book. I listened to it on audio through Scribd, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a really cool concept, and I enjoyed the writing style. And overall, I just thought it was a really well done book. Next, I read The Lost Hero by Rick Riordan. This is the first book in the Heroes of Olympus series, which follows the Percy Jackson in the Olympian series. And so this follows the story of Jason Grace, and Percy has gone missing. Jason Grace turns up and he doesn't remember where he's from, why he ended up in this school, how he got there. And so this is following his quest to figure all that out and basically save the world. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. I always love Rick Riordan's books. They're always really fun and funny, and so definitely check these out. Next, I read To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. I love this book. This is my second time reading it. It follows the story of Laura Jean, and every time she has some unrequited love, she writes a letter and puts it in a hat box, and that is her way of getting closure. And one day she discovers that all the letters in her hat box have been sent out, and the boys are approaching her, and just chaos ensues. And so she ends up getting in a fake relationship with one of the guys in order to get over another guy, and it is just so sweet and so cute, and the family dynamics are so wonderful. I recommend this. It's such a good book. And then I read P.S. I Still Love You by Jenny Han, which is the second book in the trilogy, so I won't go into what this is about, but it follows immediately after To All the Boys I've Loved Before. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, really good. Next, I read Son of Neptune by Rick Riordan. This is the second book in the Heroes of Olympus series, and it just continues on the story of Jason Grace and Percy Jackson from The Lost Hero. I gave that one 5 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Lightning Thief graphic novel by Rick Riordan, Attila Futaki, Robert Venditti, and Jose Villarrubia. Sorry if I mispronounced that. But I really enjoyed this. The art style was really good, and it was a really fast read. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars, and I loved it. And next I read Always and Forever Laura Jean, which is the third and final book in the To All the Boys I've Loved Before trilogy. This one is probably my favorite in the series just because Laura Jean grows the most in this book, and she learns some really hard life lessons that just really help her grow as a character and as a person. And I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. Next I read The Pint of No Return by Ellie Alexander. This is the second book in the Sloane Krause Cozy Mystery series, and it's set in Leavenworth, Washington, or Bavaria, and it follows Sloane Krause, who works at an independent brewing company, and she gets involved in a murder mystery and has to figure out who the murderer is. And I love Ellie Alexander, which I'm sure you know if you've seen any of my other videos, but this one was no exception. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I love the atmosphere. I love the characters in this book. They're so well developed, and it's so easy to picture myself in Leavenworth while the Oktoberfest festival is going on, and so I just highly recommend her series. Every book I've read by her has been really good. Next I read Not the Girls You're Looking For by Amina May Safi, and I started reading this on audiobook, and I ended up switching to the physical book because I connected with it more. It basically follows the story of Lulu, and she is super rebellious and doesn't want to follow the rules. One night she goes to a party, and something happens and it causes a rift between her and her friends, and it's also a little traumatizing for her. So she's trying to work through that, and in the process she meets this boy who is amazing and I love him, and they develop a relationship, and she's kind of learning to come to terms with who she is as a person, and as well as making up with her friends and getting the truth out there. So I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It was pretty good. I enjoyed the story. I just thought it was a little slow in places, but overall it was an enjoyable read. I'm sorry for the noise. My dog Butch is chewing on his elk antler, so if you hear little like snaps or pops, that's what he's doing. Next I read Lucy. So Lucy decided to make an appearance. Hello. Yeah, well, Miss Cranky Pants. Next I read The Sea of Monsters and The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan, the graphic novels. Again, I gave these each 4 out of 5 stars. They were really enjoyable, and I love the artwork. Next, I read Death Note 3, which was just a continuation of Death Note 1 and 2. And so the government is still trying to figure out who is causing all these deaths. The main character just has to keep stepping up his game so he doesn't get caught, and we just learn a lot more about the Death Note. And it was such a good book. Gave that one 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Tea Dragon Society. This is the Owl Crate edition, I believe, and it's by Katie O'Neill. And this was such an adorable, wholesome, feel-good book, and it follows the story of this girl who meets this man who raises tea dragons, and tea dragons grow little plants and leaves on their antlers or horns, and those are brewed into this amazing tea. And so it's a dying art, so the main character gets an opportunity to learn how the process works and to carry on the tradition. And these little tea dragons are just so adorable. Like, I want one. And in the back of the book, they give a description of each of the tea dragons and if they're good pets and all different types. And it's just so stinking cute. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And I'm definitely excited about the sequel, the Tea Dragon Festival. But I highly recommend that you read this. It just makes you happy, and it just feels like a big hug when you read it. So, next, I read Depression and Other Magic Tricks by Sabrina Benaim. Sorry if I mispronounced that. This is my second time reading this poetry collection, and I love it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I just love the way she writes. She writes about depression and anxiety and love while you are depressed, and just everyday things when you're anxious and you're bipolar. And this really resonated with me, and it's really personal to me, so I really connect with almost every single poem in here, and I just recommend it to everyone I read because it's such a good look into the mind of people who suffer with depression and mental illness and anxiety. So definitely a good poetry collection to check out. Next, I read Miss Rumpius, which is by Barbara Cooney, and I loved this book as a child. I read it for a prompt for the Newts, and it basically is the story of the Lupin lady and all her adventures that she had in life, and it was so good. I loved that book when I was a kid, so I actually gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Miss Marvel Volume 1 by G. Willow Wilson, and this follows the story of a Muslim American girl, and one night something happens and she ends up just wishing that she could be something more than she is, and she meets Miss Marvel, and so she gets a chance to become Miss Marvel and take a walk in her shoes and become the superhero that she wants to be, and the story goes from there. I thought it was a really good story. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed the artwork and the writing style, and I'm definitely going to continue with the series. Next, I read Illegal by Eowyn Colfer. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. It's the author of the Artemis Fowl series. And Illegal is a graphic novel that follows the story of this boy and his brothers and their friends and their trip from like war-torn third world Africa, and they're trying to get to Europe for a better life. And it's a really harrowing book, and you follow their journey through the desert and over the ocean and crossing over to Europe, and just how horrible the conditions are, and how some of these people who help them cross are just swindlers. And it was a hard read, but it was a good read, and I definitely recommend that you check it out. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I shed some tears, I'm not gonna lie, but I just think it's such an educational, important story, so definitely go read it. I read Heretics Anonymous by Katie Henry. This is the second time I've read this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and it follows the story of Michael, who is an atheist, and he and his family moved to this town, and he ends up going to a Catholic school and making friends with some of his classmates who have either different beliefs or they kind of challenge the Catholic way of thinking. And they form a group called Heretics Anonymous as a way to reveal the hypocrisy of some of the school's rules and procedures and policies. And this book was so freaking funny and so good, and I just highly recommend it. It doesn't look down on religion per se. It's just kind of exploring, like, questioning why certain things are the way they are from an atheist's point of view and a Catholic point of view. And it's not political, it's just a really good high school story, and there's a love interest in there, and I love this book so much, so definitely go check it out. The laughs make it totally worth it. Next, I read House of Night Legacy by PC Cast. It's a graphic novel, and it follows the story. The main character, she is becoming the head of like a coven, and the goddess Nyx is the person who chose her to be the head of this, and so she's trying to learn how to be a good leader. And so she is going through these stories with her friends and learning how it applies to her own life so she can be a good leader. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was entertaining. It just wasn't really my thing. Next, I read Pelvis with Distance by Jessica Jacobs. This is a poetry collection that explores life through Georgia O'Keeffe's life, and kind of juxtaposes it with the narrator's life. And I just thought the writing was really good. The stories and the poems were just so well done, and I loved the different styles of poetry in here. It was really cohesive. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I definitely recommend it, especially if you love poetry. Next, I read Anthony Bourdain's Hungry Ghosts by Anthony Bourdain and Joel Rosé. And this follows, honestly, it was really weird, but basically they're at a dinner party, and this Russian main character starts a game where they have to tell more and more terrifying stories, and then you look in this mirror, and if you see yourself, you haven't been possessed. And the stories were really messed up and disturbing and disgusting. I will say the art style was really good, and I gave this 2 stars just because it really wasn't my cup of tea. But I love Anthony Bourdain, and I love who he is as a person, and so I thought this was really cool to kind of get kind of an idea of how his brain works when writing stories, so I thought it was cool, but definitely not really my cup of tea. Next, I read Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This is the second time I've read this book, and it follows the story of Alex, who is the son of the first female president of the United States, and Henry, who is a prince of England, and it's kind of a love-to-hate relationship. They have this adversarial relationship, and an event happens where they just embarrass the crown and the White House, and so they go through this PR campaign to try to show that they are good friends, and America and England are working together, and their relationship grows from there. This book is so freaking funny. I was laughing out loud the entire time I was reading it, and I love the wit in it and how well developed these characters are, and they're just so real. I just loved this book so much. I have not heard a bad review of this book, so please go read it. You will not be sorry. Obviously, I gave this 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. This is the author of the book Milk and Honey. I absolutely loved Milk and Honey. I thought a lot of the poems resonated with me, and I was really disappointed in this one. There were a couple poems in here that I enjoyed, but for the most part, they just really fell flat, especially compared to Milk and Honey. I gave this 2 out of 5 stars. I'll probably try to read it again at some point and see if my opinion changes. I just didn't... Nah. Next, I read The Smell of Other People's Houses by Bonnie Sue Hitchcock, and this follows 4 different characters in Alaska, and the stories that are being told, all their lives intersect at some point, and I won't go too much into it because I went into this not really knowing anything about it, and I absolutely loved it. So I think it's a good way to go into this novel, and I just really enjoyed the writing style. I loved the relationship of the characters and how the author created this world and connected all the characters together. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And last but not least, I read the middle grade novel Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga, and it is a story told in verse, and it follows the story of Jude, and she and her mother come to America from war-torn Syria, and so she's learning how to fit in, and at first America is just so much, and so she suffers from a lot of culture shock, and she's learning what it's like to be labeled Middle Eastern and what it's like to wear the hijab in America, and she starts making friends and kind of figuring out who she is, and starts to accept that she's going to be in America for a while and starts to love it. And I just thought it was such a good story. I just fell in love with the characters, and it's heartbreaking and hopeful, and I highly recommend it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Overall, I read 7,619 pages this month, so quite the good reading month. And I am so sorry this video is so long, but 30 books takes forever. But if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and click the subscribe button. And if you haven't already, make sure to click the bell icon so that you can be notified anytime I upload new content. See you guys next time. Bye.